What happens when a late-night talk show host finally says what everyone's been thinking about a certain royal? Well, buckle up, because Stephen Colbert just delivered the most brutal takedown in television history, and Prince Harry walked right into it. This isn't your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how to expose someone's true character on live television. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets absolutely wild. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was supposed to be another routine promotional stop for Prince Harry. His publicist had arranged the appearance to coincide with his latest charitable venture, something about mental health awareness that would make him look good in the headlines. The green room was buzzing with the usual pre-show energy, but Harry seemed different tonight. He was pacing, checking his phone constantly and snapping at his assistant over minor details. "Your Royal Highness, we're ready for you," the stage manager announced, but Harry barely acknowledged him. He was too busy complaining about the lighting setup. "This lighting is terrible, don't you? People know how to properly light someone of my stature. I've done interviews with the BBC. With Oprah, with real professionals. This looks like amateur hour." The stage manager, a 20-year veteran of television production, bit his tongue. He dealt with difficult celebrities before, but there was something particularly grating about Harry's. Entitled "Attitude, Sir." "This is the same lighting setup we use for every guest. The President of the United States sat in that same chair last month. Well, I'm not the President, am I? I'm a member of the British royal family. There's a difference in how these things should be handled." Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert was reviewing his notes in his office, completely unaware of the drama unfolding backstage. His producer knocked and entered with a concerned expression. "Stephen, we might have a situation. With tonight's guest, Harry's been difficult with the crew, and his people are making some unusual demands." Colbert looked up from his cards. What kind of demands? They want approval over the questions. They want to know exactly what topics will be covered, and they're insisting on a list of forbidden subjects, apparently anything about his family, his military service, his business ventures, or his personal relationships is off limits. Stephen leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "So, basically, they want me to ask him about the weather. That's about the size of it. His publicist is waiting outside, if you want to discuss it. Send her in." The publicist, a sharp-dressed woman with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes, entered with a folder full of papers. "Mr. Colbert, thank you so much for having His Royal Highness on the show. I just wanted to go over a few guidelines to ensure the interview goes smoothly." Stephen glanced at the papers she placed on his desk. "These aren't guidelines. These are restrictions. You're basically asking me to conduct a non-inter. We prefer to think of it as maintaining appropriate boundaries. Prince Harry has been through a lot, and we want to create a safe space for him to share his message about mental health." "A safe space?" Stephen's eyebrows rose. "This is a comedy show, not a therapy session. People tune in to see real conversation, not a scripted promotional segment." The publicist's smile became more strained. "I understand your position, but these are non-negotiable terms. His Royal Highness has very specific requirements for media appearances." "Well, here's the thing about my show," Stephen said, standing up and walking to his window. "I don't do puff pieces. I don't do scripted conversations. If Prince Harry wants to come on my show, he'll answer the questions. I ask, just like every other guest. If he can't handle that, maybe he should stick to pre-recorded interviews where he can control every word." The publicist gathered her papers, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "I'll need to discuss this with His Royal Highness. You do that, and tell him if he doesn't like the way we do things here, he's welcome to leave." 20 minutes later, Harry stormed into Stephen's office without knocking, his face flushed with anger. "Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Stephen didn't look up from his desk. "I'm talking to someone who apparently thinks he's too important to follow the same rules as everyone else. I am a prince of the United Kingdom. I've served my country in Afghanistan. I've dedicated my life to charitable causes. I deserve better treatment than this. You deserve exactly the same treatment as every other guest on this show. No more, no less." Stephen finally looked up his expression, calm but firm. "You're not in the palace anymore. Harry, you're in America on my show, and here we treat everyone equally." Harry's voice rose to a near shout. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed, what I've given up. I left everything behind: my family, my country, my birthright. And to be disrespected by some late-night comedian you left because you couldn't handle the responsibilities that came with your position. You wanted all the benefits of being royal without any of the obligations." Stephen's voice remained steady. "But there was steel in it now. And now you want to come on my show and control the narrative, just like you tried to control everything else." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Harry's heavy breathing. The two men stared at each other across the desk, neither willing to back down. Finally, Stephen spoke again. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to go out there, and I'm going to ask you questions. Real questions about your choices, your behavior, your impact on the people around you. You can answer them honestly, or you can storm off. But I'm not going to pretend this is anything other than what it is." Harry's jaw clenched. "And what exactly is it? In your opinion, a conversation between two adults about accountability? Something?" "You seem to have trouble with." Stephen stood up and straightened his tie. "The show starts in 5 minutes. Are you coming? Or should I tell the audience we're doing a segment about empty chairs?" Instead, the studio audience was already warmed up and buzzing with anticipation when Stephen walked out to his desk. His opening monologue had gone smoothly, hitting all the usual political targets with his signature blend of wit and sarcasm. But now came the moment everyone was waiting for. "Ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is here to talk about his latest charitable initiative. Please welcome Prince Harry." The audience applauded politely as Harry walked out, his smile looking forced and his posture rigid. He waved briefly before taking his seat across from Stephen, who was shuffling his note cards with deliberate casualness. "So, Prince Harry, thanks for being here. How are you enjoying your life in America?" "It's been wonderful, Stephen. The freedom to speak my truth, to live authentically. It's something I never had." "In the UK, your truth. That's an interesting phrase. Some people might say there's just the truth, period. But let's talk about this mental health initiative you're promoting. Tell us about." That Harry launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about the importance of mental health awareness, dropping buzzwords like vulnerable communities and breaking stigma with practiced ease. Stephen listened patiently, nodding at appropriate intervals, but his eyes never left Harry's face. "That's fascinating," Stephen interrupted smoothly. "But I'm curious about something. You talk a lot about mental health and vulnerability, but your own family has been pretty open about their struggles. Your brother William has spoken about his mental health challenges. After your mother's death, your father has discussed his difficulties. Yet you've spent the last few years publicly attacking them. How do you reconcile that?" Harry's smile faltered. "I think there's a difference between being open about struggles and actually addressing systemic problems." "Systemic problems, you mean, like the system that gave you a privileged life, world-class education, military training, and a platform to help millions of people, the system that also controlled every aspect of my life, that denied me basic privacy, that treated my wife terribly because of her background." Stephen leaned forward slightly. "Your wife chose to marry into that system knowing exactly what it was. She was an actress, she understood media attention. She had advisors, she had support, but instead of working within the system to change it, you both chose to burn it down and profit from the destruction." The audience was dead silent. Now, sensing the shift in tone, Harry's publicist was visible in the wings, making cutting motions with her hand, but Stephen ignored her completely. "That's not fair, Stephen. You don't understand the pressures we were under. I understand pressure. I understand having a job where millions of people watch your every move and judge your performance. The difference is, I don't blame everyone else when things get difficult." Stephen's voice remained conversational, but there was an edge to it. "Now you want to talk about mental health. Let's talk about the mental health impact you've had on your family. Your grandfather died while you were busy giving interviews about how terrible your life was. Your grandmother spent her final years watching you tear apart the institution she dedicated her life to building. Harry's face was turning red. My grandmother understood my position. She supported my decision to step back. Did she, or did she just love you enough to not publicly disagree with you while you were destroying her legacy on international television? You have no right to speak about my grandmother. You didn't know her. You're right. I didn't know her personally, but I know what she represented: duty service. Putting the needs of others before your own desires. Everything you've rejected in favor of celebrity, status, and book deals. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination. Sit down. Harry Stevens' voice was calm but commanding. You came on my show. You wanted to use my platform to promote your agenda. The least you can do is have the courtesy to finish the conversation. This isn't a conversation. It's an ambush. No, this is what happens when someone finally asks you the questions everyone else is thinking. You've spent years controlling the narrative, choosing friendly interviewers who won't challenge you. But the truth has a way of coming out. Eventually, Harry remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. What truth that I chose? Happiness over duty that I chose. Love over obligation. You chose self-interest over service. You chose fame over family. You chose money over loyalty. Stephen's words hit like hammer blows, and now you're trying to rewrite history to make yourself the victim in a story where you're clearly the villain. I'm not the villain. I'm someone who stood up to a corrupt system that was destroying my mental health and my family. Your family. You mean the wife who's alienated from her own father and siblings, the woman who's managed to burn bridges with everyone who's ever tried to help her. You want to talk about patterns of behavior. Let's talk about that pattern. The audience was completely silent now, watching this unprecedented destruction of a royal reputation. In real time, Harry's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Don't you dare bring my wife into this. She's done nothing but try to make a positive difference in the world by selling out your family's private conversations, by making accusations of racism, without providing any evidence, by turning your grandmother's funeral into a photo opportunity for your personal brand. That's enough. Harry's voice cracked with emotion. I came here in good faith to discuss important issues, and you've turned it into a personal attack. You came here to use my show as free advertising for your latest project, but I'm not going to help you rehabilitate your image at the expense of the truth. Stephen paused, letting his words sink in. You know, what's really tragic about this whole situation? You had everything, literally everything. A loving family, a position of influence, the ability to make a real difference in the world, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle being second fiddle to your brother. Harry's voice rose to a shout. This has nothing to do with William, doesn't it? Everything you've done has been about getting attention, about proving you're just as important as the future king. The problem is, you're not. You never were, and instead of accepting that and finding your own way to contribute, you've spent years trying to tear down everyone who reminds you of your true place in the hierarchy. My true place. Harry was practically vibrating with rage. My true place was serving my country, protecting my family, upholding the values my mother taught me, but that wasn't enough for them. Was it? It was enough. It was more than enough. But it wasn't enough for you. Stephen's voice cut through Harry's protests like a knife. You wanted to be the star of your own show, not a supporting character in someone else's story. So you created drama, manufactured crisis, and when that didn't work, you ran away and started selling your family's secrets to the highest bidder. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of this verbal demolition. Harry looked around the studio as if seeing it clearly for the first time, realizing that millions of people were watching him being systematically destroyed on live television. You think you're so clever? Don't you? Harry's voice was shaking now, sitting there in your little late-night bubble making jokes about people whose lives you couldn't begin to understand. You have no idea what it's like to live under that kind of scrutiny, that kind of pressure. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to earn my position through hard work instead of inheriting it through birth. I know what it's like to be grateful for opportunities instead of treating them as burdens. And I know what it's like to take responsibility for my mistakes instead of blaming everyone else. Harry began pacing behind his chair, his composure completely shattered. This is exactly why we left. This is exactly the kind of treatment. We were trying to escape. No, this is accountability. This is what happens when you can't control the narrative anymore. This is what happens when someone finally calls you out for your behavior, instead of enabling it. The audience was transfixed, watching what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about interviews in television history. Harry stopped pacing and stared directly at Stephen, his eyes blazing with fury. You want to know the truth, the real truth. My family are cowards. They're prisoners of their own making, too afraid to speak out, too afraid to change, too afraid to admit that the whole system is rotten to its core. Or maybe they're just mature enough to understand that some things are bigger than their personal feelings. Maybe they understand that institutions aren't perfect, but they're worth preserving and improving, rather than destroying. Improving, Harry laughed bitterly. They had centuries to improve. Nothing changed until I forced their hand. You didn't force anything, you just created chaos and then blamed everyone else for the mess you made. You didn't force anything, you just created chaos and then blamed everyone else for the mess you made. Stephen leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, despite the storm raging across from him. But here's what really gets me. Harry, you sit there talking about courage and speaking truth, but you've never once taken responsibility for the pain you've caused the people who loved you most. Harry whirled, around his face contorted with rage. Pain I've caused. What about the pain they caused me? What about watching my wife be destroyed by their silence, their complicity? Your wife wasn't destroyed by anyone except herself. She came into that family with her own agenda, her own plans. And when she realized she couldn't control everything, she convinced you to burn it all down with her. That is absolutely not true, isn't it? Let's talk about the timeline here. She marries. You gets the fairy tale wedding, gets the title, gets the platform, but then she realizes that being a working royal actually involves work, involves following protocols, involves putting the institution before personal desires. So what happens suddenly? There are leaks to the press. Suddenly, there are complaints about racism. Suddenly, there are demands for special treatment. Harry's hands were shaking. Now, you're twisting everything. You're making her sound like some kind of manipulator. I'm not making her sound like anything. I'm describing her actions and your actions because you enabled every single step of this destruction. Stephen's voice remained steady, but his words were devastating. You had a choice, Harry. When the going got tough, you could have stood by your family, worked through the problems, been the man your mother raised you to be. Instead, you chose to be the weapon your wife used to destroy everything your grandmother built. Don't you dare bring my mother into this. Your mother is already in this. Every time you betray your family, you betray her memory. Every time you sell out your brother, you spit on everything she taught you about loyalty and love. The audience was watching in stunned silence as Harry completely lost control. He grabbed his chair and slammed it against the floor, the sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. You have no right. You have no right to talk about my mother, about my family, about my life. I have every right, because you put it all on display for profit. You wrote a book about it. You did interviews about it. You made documentaries about it. You turned your family's private pain into public entertainment. And now you're angry because someone's finally asking the hard questions. Harry was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. This interview is over. I'm done with this. No, you're not done. You're never done. You'll go back to California, and you'll call your publicist and you'll figure out how to spin this. You'll find a way to make yourself the victim again because that's what you do. That's all you know how to do. I said this interview is over. Harry shouted, his voice cracking, and I said, "You're not done." Stephen stood up slowly, his presence commanding the room. "You came on my show to promote your latest attempt at relevance. You wanted to use my platform to rehabilitate your image, but I'm not going to let you leave here without hearing some truth for once in your privileged life." Harry started walking toward the edge of the stage, but Stephen's voice stopped him cold. "You want to know what your real legacy is going to be. Harry, it's not going to be mental health advocacy or charitable work. It's going to be the prince who couldn't handle being prince, the man who had everything handed to him and threw it away because he couldn't stand not being the center of attention." Harry spun around, his face purple with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You're a middle-aged man who's still throwing tantrums because life didn't go exactly the way you wanted. You're so desperate for sympathy that you'll destroy anyone who gets in your way, including the people who love you most. That's it," Harry screamed, his voice echoing off the studio walls. "I'm calling my lawyers. This is harassment. This is defamation. Truth isn't defamation. Harry, and threatening lawsuits just proves my point when you can't control the narrative. You try to silence the critics just like you tried to silence your own family." Harry was completely unhinged now, pacing frantically around the interview area. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've got it all figured out. You're just another bitter American who's jealous of what we represent, what you represent." Stephen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You represent nothing. You're a cautionary tale about what happens when privilege meets entitlement and nobody has the courage to say no." "Security!" Harry suddenly shouted toward the wings. "Get me security. I want this man arrested." The studio security guards looked confused, unsure whether to intervene. Stephen waved them off with a calm gesture. "Nobody's getting arrested. Harry, this is America. We have something called free speech here. Maybe you've heard of it. This isn't free speech. This is a hit job. This is a setup. You planned. This whole thing. I planned to ask you questions. Real questions. The kind of questions you've been avoiding for years. If you can't handle that, maybe you should go back to your mansion and think about why Harry was hyperventilating. Now his carefully constructed public persona completely shattered. I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to take this from you or anyone else. You're right. You don't. You can walk out of here, right? Now. But if you do, everyone's going to know exactly what kind of man you really are. They're going to see that. When someone finally stands up to you, when someone finally tells you the truth, you run away, just like you ran away from your family, just like you ran away from your responsibilities, just like you run away from everything that requires real courage." The silence in the studio was deafening. Harry stood there, trembling with rage and humiliation, realizing that he was trapped if he stayed. Stephen would continue to destroy him. If he left, he'd look like a coward. "Get out," Stephen said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Get out of my studio. Get out of my show. You've wasted enough of everyone's time." Harry's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't kick me off. I'm a guest on your show." "You were a guest now. You're just a man having a public breakdown on national television security. Please escort Prince Harry out of the building." The security guards, finally understanding what was happening, moved toward Harry with professional calm. Harry looked around wildly as if searching for an escape route or someone to help him. "This isn't over," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Stephen replied, sitting back down at his desk. "It's been over for a long time. You just finally figured it out." As the security guards gently but firmly guided Harry toward the exit, Stephen turned to address the camera directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll have some music from our friend John Batiste." The studio erupted in applause as Harry disappeared through the exit. His publicist running after him in a panic, Stephen sat at his desk, straightening his tie and shuffling his papers as if nothing extraordinary had just happened, but something Extraordinary had happened for the first time in years. Someone had finally said what everyone was thinking about Prince Harry. Someone had finally held him accountable for his actions, his choices, his betrayals, and the whole world had watched it happen as the commercial break began. Stephen looked directly into the camera one more time. Sometimes the truth hurts, but that doesn't make it any less true. The cameras stopped rolling, but the damage was done. Prince Harry had been exposed, his carefully crafted victim narrative destroyed, his true character revealed for all to see, and Stephen Colbert had delivered the most devastating takedown in late-night television history. All without raising his voice or losing his composure. The prince was gone, but the truth remained. What did you think of Stephen's handling of Prince Harry? Did he go too far? Or was it exactly what needed to be said? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more content that isn't afraid to tell the truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be.